Good afternoon and welcome back to the regular session of the Lane County Board of County Commissioners. It's Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. In continuing on with our daily business, we are coming to our work order number 9, our public works order, a third reading and a public hearing. The third reading and continued public hearing on ordinance 2504 in the matter of amending the Lane Management Division's building program fee schedule effective July 1, 2025. The purpose of this continued public hearing is for the board to receive public testimony on the proposed ordinance. The order of proceedings for this matter will be first the report by staff, followed by a public testimony and then additional comments or clarifications from staff, and then discussion and possible action on by the board. I will call for the disclosure by the board members of any ex parte contacts and or abstentions on this matter due to conflicts of interests or biases. And I'll start to my left, Commissioner Buck.
None.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
I have none.
Commissioner Trieger.
None.
And I have none to declare as well. And please note for the record that Commissioner and Vice Chair Ryan Senega is excused absent in Washington, D.C. We will now hear a report by staff, and with us we have our incomparable Land Management Division Department Head, Keir Miller. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Chair Lovell, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Just by way of introduction, I'll mention that this is a continued public hearing. This public hearing was opened back on March 11th and that for a third reading, and it's been, second reading. It's been continued to today to allow for additional opportunity for public comment. Again, the purpose of this hearing is for the board to review proposed changes to the Land Management Division fee schedule. I gave an overview on March 11th of these changes, and I don't intend to go through that entire presentation, but just for the benefit of the public watching and Commissioner Farr, who wasn't here last time, I'll just briefly recap on where we're at with things. Just again, the Land Management Division currently has a structurally imbalanced budget to the tune of about $1.2 million. This is a slight improvement from when I was back on March 11th as we moved through the budget process. All departments in the county have been asked to find ways to reduce costs and try to maximize efficiency without impacting services, and the land management is no different. Right now, our structural deficit, instead of it was $1,350,000, it's about $1.2 million now. So that's a little bit of good news. The bad news is we're still in a fairly large structural deficit. To address this, the Land Management Division has looked at a number of different options over the years. As the board is aware, we're an enterprise fund intended to be primarily fee supported. In reality, we only recoup about 35% of our total costs through permit fees. So our building permit and land use fees are subsidized to the tune of 65%. So, and that it's inverted. Over about a decade ago, we received about 65% in permit fees, and now we're at 35%. So our recent study that I discussed last time has shown that we're really not coming close to recovering costs. So that's sort of the dilemma we find ourselves in. LMD has traditionally been subsidized through different programs such as the video lottery, and this is really what's helped carry us through these times. However, in recent years, costs have increased, labor have increased, operational overheads and indirects and everything have gone up. At the same time, LMD has added additional staff, which have helped, on a number of fronts. Again, back with the housing, the fall of the housing market back in 2009, LMD laid off approximately 50% of its staff, and we've been in a rebuilding mode until just the last handful of years. So the division really has operated on a very lean budget over the years, and we have finally reestablish some of those positions, and as a result, I've discussed with the board in recent months some of the improvements we've made both in permit processing timelines and process improvements, and large initiatives such as that we're really hoping not to go backwards on. So right now, I want to talk a little bit about the public testimony that you've received. So last at the second reading, opening of the public hearing, you received public testimony from Gary Rose, a developer out on the coast and contractor, as well as the Eugene Realtors. There were comments entered into the record from another builder located on the coast and a realtor And so you've had a handful of public comments. I'm not sure if we'll have any online today. I don't see any right now. But I did want to just briefly respond to the comments. The general tone of the comments was a feeling that this is a pretty large increase, which we fully acknowledge. We have a large structural deficit, and it's going to be painful to implement all at once. Also, the concerns about the impact on affordable housing, which is certainly a concern of ours as well. And then finally, a discussion about, instead of just increasing costs, what is the division doing to be more efficient and reduce costs? So I'll address each of those. First, with the concerns over affordable housing, we recognize that it's never a good time to increase building permit fees. Back during the bubble when prices were very expensive and everybody was trying to buy homes, we were admonished for trying to raise fees at that time because it was going to slow down this hot market, and permits were really, going to slow things down, and building and homes were expensive. Well, we're in a similar situation now, except we're homes are expensive and we're not in a, we're in maybe moving into a recession. So it's never a great time. To address this concern, though, we did do some analysis and looked at what these permit increases would do in terms of impacting the overall cost of a typical 2,500 square foot house. And the analysis in the packet for the first public hearing showed that really the overall cost would be less than 1% of the total cost to develop that home. So it's, like I said last time, it's not nothing. It is an increase, but overall it's not a dramatic increase. It's fairly de minimis. The other thing we've done to address those concerns is in your packet today, I've provided a few different options for you, and I'll be discussing those. One of those would be an option for the board to put a freeze on any permit fees that really address affordable housing. So there's a few permit types that we associate with affordable housing. Those are manufactured homes and a mobile home park. Those tend to be the lowest cost homes that we see at the county. Accessory dwelling units, those aren't, we don't have enough data on those to really show how many of those are being built for low income housing, but it's certainly one of the less expensive permits to apply for. And then, of course, emergency RVs for folks who just find themselves in a temporary emergency, need a place to live. So one of the options available to the board would be to increase the other fees, but put a hold on any increases in those permit types to try to address that. Regarding the efficiency concerns, I'll reiterate that the Land Management Division has operated in this environment of scarcity for a long time. We have had to become more efficient just out of necessity. Again, as we've rebuilt staff over the past few years, it's not a coincidence that during the same time, our permit timelines have reduced. We've been able to implement important programs such as the ePass, the electronic permit application submittal system. So we have made advancements. I can certainly understand this concern of coming with our handout if we hadn't had anything to show for it. But over the last several years, I think we've made improvements based on those investments that the board has made. And we're now at a place now where we don't have those extended timelines. So I think there's a strong correlation there. Things are objectively better now within LMD. And frankly, we're trying to overcome what I think is a legacy of scarcity that's created some of the negative impacts and observations and opinions about LMD in the community. We're now at a good place, and I really are hopeful that we don't have to go backwards from there. Let's see. We received testimony on those two areas, and there was cost-cutting measures I've discussed. Impacts on affordable housing. Yeah, I think I'm sorry, the one other thing, just today in public comment, you heard from Bill Compton. I really appreciated Mr. Compton's comments. He correctly pointed out that the majority of Lane County voters view public safety as a priority. We understand that. Our goal here in coming to the board, we are allowed through statute to recoup costs for our services through permit fees. And that's what we're asking for here today, is to be able to raise our fees to cover those costs so we don't have to impact those funds such as the general fund. that would cut into services for the LCSO and other important programs in the county. So our goal is to take the burden off of that fund by increasing our permit fees. Again, we subsidize those fees pretty heavily, and this would, the fee increases that we're proposing would bring us to about a 50% subsidy, so still a fairly healthy subsidy in permit fees with the proposals that we brought forward. So this is, again, just the total costs of what the 21% increase would have on the different permit types. Last time we were talking about a 22.5% increase, which was just over a $2,000 total increase for a full stick-built home, including all the electrical, sanitation permits, as well as the structural building permits. Now at 21%, slightly less than $2,000 increase. The main options that we've developed for your consideration are phasing options, really. We do have healthy reserves, which is great. If we were to phase in these fee increases to sort of lessen the brunt over a period of 2 to 3 years, we would have to draw down reserves to some extent. But in the long run, if costs remain relatively the same, we'd end up with a structurally balanced budget. So we have two proposals. The first, option one, would be to phase in the increase over 2 years. It'd be a 10.5% increase per year. Option two is a 3-year, 7% phased increase. The one thing that I do want to point out to the board is that regardless of these new increases, LMD comes annually or biannually for a CPI-based adjustment. And we didn't come to the board over the last couple of years because we were working on this fee study. That fee, the CPI adjustments have been incorporated into that first year fee increase. So in other words, if the board were to select option one, in year one, it wouldn't actually be it would be a 10.5% increase, but only 4.4% of that would be in addition to the CPI that we would have asked for anyways. And under option two, it'd be only a 1.4% increase. So those are the two options. And then, of course, we recommend that the board also adopt an ordinance that would direct us to increase fees based on the next 2-year CPI or 3 years based on the option that's selected, to just fold those into the increase. And again, down here at the bottom, I list those permit types that we're discussing for the targeted exemptions on the increase. RV placements, accessory dwelling units, and manufactured dwellings in mobile home parks would be those 3 permit types. Either option 1 or 2 would get us to a structurally balanced budget. It's just a matter of the impact on our reserves. There is some information in the packet regarding the overall impact on reserves. It basically takes about a month or 2 off of our overall reserves. So we have, our goals have 18 months of reserves. We currently have about 11 months of reserves. Under option 2, we would have a smaller impact on our reserves because we'd only have to subsidize those fees for 2 years instead of 3. And then under option 2, it would be a greater impact on our reserves, but not dramatic. So staff is really, at the board's pleasure, we're requesting either option 1 or 2, and we do recommend that the board put an exemption on those certain permits for affordable housing. Again, as I mentioned on March 11th, in addition to this base fee increase of 21%, there are a few other permit types that have been rolled into this, and these are the same. These haven't changed since we presented this to the Finance and Audit Committee back in December or to the board on March 11th. So these are the same fee types that we're proposing, some reductions, some increases. These are new fee types and clarification of an existing fee type. I'm happy to talk more about that. There was some discussion last time about potential impacts to the division if we did not increase fees. Of course, we would try to stabilize ourselves with reserves for 1 or 2 years, but that really isn't a long-term solution. It's not sustainable. There would be significant impacts over time to the division. The biggest one, of course, would be increase in permit processing times. We're required by state law to process permits, building permits, sanitation, and land use permits, but not all of those permit types have a deadline for processing under statute. Some of the planning permits do. We would, of course, do everything we can to keep permit timelines down, but the reality is that processing timelines would increase. Another big service hit would be in our public information services. The division currently assists scores of residents weekly with questions about development, individuals doing due diligence on property they want to purchase. All of this is we don't receive fees for this. This is customer service in support of the bigger work of the division. We would certainly need to cut back some of those public assistance functions, and that would probably, increase wait times for folks to get answers that they need when they're looking to buy a piece of property. So it would have serious impacts on the public. The other is code enforcement. We currently have 2.5 FTE, 2.5 positions for the entire county. It's not a lot of code enforcement staff. Some of our comparators have double that. Deschutes County, for example, has 5 code enforcement officers for a smaller county with less population. Right now, we're just able to respond to some of the more, significant nuisance properties. We generally deal with life safety issues, complaints such as like nuisance vegetation, sound, even, occupied RVs and things like that. We're not able to follow up on all of those. Or nuisance junk, for example, hoarding situations. Sometimes these go unanswered for years, and I know the board hears a lot about those kind of cases. So that's another concern. We would probably, that's not a mandated function. We have to enforce our code to some extent, but that's not really defined in state law how much we enforce our code. Is it half a FTE? We don't know, but that's probably where we'd be looking for cost cutting as well. Long-range planning would suffer. This is the work that really the division does to improve our code, to update our rural comprehensive plan, to make the code more efficient, to address the needs of the small cities and their efforts. Again, not all of that work is mandated. And then finally, closure of the Florence satellite office would probably be another impact. So the question was asked. I want to make it transparent what these impacts would be. Of course, we hope that we can eliminate all, any of these reductions. I just want to be clear on what sort of services might be impacted. So next steps, again, there are 2 items before the board. The first item right now is the public hearing on ordinance 25-04, which would be an amendment to the building program fee schedule, which has to be implemented through a public hearing. The item immediately following this is an order that would implement the same changes to the land management division's planning and stormwater and on-site sanitation program fees. So right now, we're asking that the board provide direction on which option they would like us to see return with a modified ordinance to the building program fee schedule. We'll be in front of you at least 2 more times. We need to modify the ordinance and come back for a 4th reading for the board to review, and then final action would have to follow a minimum of 13 days after that. So the request is direction from the board on which direction you'd like us to go in terms of increases and phasing. We provided option 1 or 2 and direct us to come back with any revisions that the board sees fit to make. If approved, those adjustments would become effective July 1st. And that concludes my presentation for the moment, and happy to turn it over to you if there's any public comment.
Great, thank you, Mr. Miller. Any questions or comments from the board on this matter? Got a lot to consider, so I'll wait a little bit. Yes, Commissioner Buck, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to appreciate you being able to come back with some additional options. The last time we heard this, it was just the 22.5% flat increase, which is pretty hefty, it feels like, right? So you were able to come back with a couple of phase-in options. I just really appreciate that, which part of, not that I want to see fees raised, but we definitely do need to lighten up the load on the general fund a little bit. There's plenty of other services I'm sure we want to fund through the general fund. What I like to see is that if we are able to implement one of these options, that we see this fund structurally balanced, which we just haven't been able to see in your division for years now, and is absolutely critical to our, budget proposals coming up as a whole for the county. So I do want to acknowledge that in these two options, the first year you mentioned that you have already included the CPI adjustment. In year 2 or 3, they're not included, so that would come back in a routine board order in the following years. But the reset would be either the 10.5 for the next 2 years or 7% for the next 3 years. That's right?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'm guessing that most people would rather see 7% over the next 3 years than 10.5, but either way, it will have an impact on your reserves. And so if we do the 10.5, the reserves go down a couple of months. If we do the 7%, the reserves go down a few more months in general. And I want to know if there is really a critical point where you feel we really can't fall below X amount of months of reserves. I'm guessing that you've provided these two as examples where either one, you won't hit that critical point, or you wouldn't propose it to us. But I wanted to hear from you specifically on that.
Sure, thank you, Chair Buck. Just to clarify, I maybe wasn't as clear as I could have been. The impact on reserves under option 1 is we're currently at about 11 months. We'd go down to 9.9 months. Under option 2, it looks like it would be 9.5 months. So not a huge difference between the two. Both of those, a 9-month reserve is still healthy. Our goal is really double that, though. I wouldn't want to get too far below either of those numbers, to be honest, just based on the volatility of the market and what we've seen happen in the past when we did not have sufficient reserves.
So we're still hitting the reserves a little bit on funding because we're not at our 18 months. But you feel like it's gonna work for you as long as we continue those regular annual CPI index increases.
Commissioner, the big unknown, of course, is just costs. As I mentioned last time, we've seen our costs, labor, overheads, indirects, everything outpace the CPI numbers through bargaining and different things where our costs have increased. There was a pretty large correction, I think, with the majority of our staff, our AFSCME representative. There was a pretty significant increase in the last round of negotiations. I don't know how things will play out in the future, but if costs, normalize to some extent, this would result in a structurally balanced budget, but I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict those costs ultimately.
And some of those contracts for staff and labor time are multi-year contracts, so we're able to at least predict for 2 or 3 years
That's correct.
what we think the costs will be, and 2 or 3 years later, you may be back to us resetting again. We're not really sure.
I hope not, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. For me, for my colleagues, either one of these options I'm okay with. Not that we want to continue increasing costs, but we do want to get this division to a structurally sound position. And so whatever the board desires, I will support any of these options.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. This is the dilemma we face as a policy body, isn't it? What to do with reserves, how to manage reserves. A couple of questions I have regarding the reserve. First off, in your estimation, what are they for? What's the main reason we have reserves?
Well, we have reserves to weather storms such as right now and to provide long-term stability, which is really the goal. If we had to lay off staff and then rebuild, you'd have greater impacts to services and frankly, economic recovery. We've seen that in the past where we've had to lay off a large portion of the staff because we didn't have reserves, and then it just took so long to rebuild that we were a hindrance to that, bounce back. So that, in my mind, that's what reserves are for.
That's what I perceived that you'd say, and really it's to weather storms, but it's not to go down in the storm. And to overspend your reserves, you go down in the storm, because what we also have to consider as we spend reserves is, what is our mechanism for replenishing them? Do we actually have a mechanism for replenishing the reserves in LMD? So do we? How do we replenish reserves 2 years from now if we spend them down today?
Well, Commissioner, it's a challenge. We have been pretty good over several years at building reserves. It's just been in the last few with these large increases that we've had to start to tap into that. We'll look for efficiencies wherever we can. We're hoping that our online permitting software is going to create some efficiencies for us that we haven't yet, achieved. But yeah, I don't have intentions to continually be looking to tap reserves. I don't know if there's a great response to your question, but
There
it's
isn't a
top
good
of mind.
response to my question, Care, because really we don't have any fixed mechanism for replenishing reserves. The only thing we have is become more efficient. Well, I trust that you continually are looking for efficiency. That's ongoing. And unless we go through a major overhaul, which isn't out of the question at some point, there's no big hit that's going to come from efficiency. You mentioned that already. So as we spend down reserves, we've got to be very cognizant of the fact that there's a good chance that as we weather the storm, we'll start taking on water, and significantly, there's no opportunity to replenish our reserves. Now, on the other hand, if we don't, if we say don't increase fees, make the cuts, we begin to fall further behind on our actual services, or we rely more on subsidy from the general fund. Now, as we look around here, and Commissioner Buck, you stated it, there's plenty of pressure from other sources on the general fund without adding more pressure from LMD. I think any one of us would say, if you had a few $1 million extra in the general fund, where would it go? And we'd all say probably into public safety, because that's what people seem to be clamoring for. So consequently, we don't want to spend down reserves. We don't want to put added pressure on the general fund, and we don't want to cut services. So what do we do? I think you've given us as good of an option as any, and I'd choose option 2 myself, is just phase it in over 3 years, taking a 1.5-month hit on reserves and kind of roll the dice for the future and replenishing them through efficiencies. So I'd love to say no fee increases, and I'd love to say no fee increases, and at the same time, don't cut services or rely on the general fund. That's just not a reasonable request, is it? So I think at this point, Chair, my thoughts on this would be to move forward with a phased 3-year 777 with what you describe as about a 1.5% cut, a 1.5-month cut on reserves. Do your best. I know you will, to make it not 1.5 months, but I'm afraid that's, you get back into a corner, and unless we start planting money trees, which I've not seen the seeds to those yet. We have to make this decision at this point in time. This, to me, seems to be the least egregious of the decisions, and one that we can stretch it out and maybe as best as we can kick the can down the road just a little bit further to see what we can do to reinvigorate the revenue stream for your department. So that's my suggestion, is that 777 option 2, as well as the cuts you've suggested on the lower income. I think there are a few other lower income areas we can look at, but that's definitely a good start. The 3 areas that you've already stated. That's where I would lay on it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. Thank you, Keir, for the presentation, and to everyone that worked on bringing us these really excellent options and being responsive to what we've asked, what the public's asked. It's hard to raise fees anytime, but as you say, there's no good time, because generally public services are the only one the public gets to say whether they like it or not, and then we have to be responsive, whereas in the private sector, they can like it or not like it, or maybe have another option of where to go, and that's just where we are. But we also have an obligation, right, to deliver excellent services to keep people safe. I mean, this is not law enforcement public safety, but it's about safety of the public, sanitary living conditions and safe job sites and so on. And I agree with what's been said before me. Anything we can do to relieve pressure from the general fund, any mechanism we have, we really are required to make use of that tool for the good of the the entirety of the general fund and the health of the organization and all the services. We can't uncouple any one service from another. They all impact each other. You know, the other volatility that we're facing obviously is at the federal level and with funding. And while that may impact less directly your division, that is something that is also likely to put further demands or strain on our general fund. So that's another mark in the favor column of adopting one of these two options. I'm personally in favor of option one, but not opposed to option two, only because we are already at a deficit in reserves, don't have a simple mechanism for rebuilding them, and we've seen those reserves come into play in the wake of the Holiday Farm fire and the rebuilding after the recession-era layoffs. So I would like to do my best to maintain as healthy a reserve as possible, particularly since this is a fee people tend to spend one time. It's not a service, an ongoing service fee that customers come back to over and over, with the exception of obviously a handful of developers, but in terms of, it's not like a parks fee or something like that. And I also very much appreciate the targeted exemptions. So I'm in support of either option. My preference is one. I will not block or oppose option two. And with the targeted exemptions, and pardon, this just might be my ignorance too, do we have any opportunity to do anything different with permitting fees for multi-unit developments that might be for affordable housing? That's another possible area that I wonder if we've looked into. Basically incentivizing multi-unit building as well as giving a break if they're lower income.
Yeah. Sorry, we really don't see multi-unit in the county yet, so we don't really even have that built into our fee structure. We see duplexes once in a while. The work up in Blue River may result in, you know, some more higher density, but I think we just don't have that demand yet. So there's not really an option to reduce those fees.
Thank you. Well, then that all the more for me is, again, this is generally for the end user, a one-time fee. They're going to pay one time in the total cost of building their one home. Is that accurate? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I'll go ahead and open the public hearing formally right now. As I'm looking around Harris Hall, I don't see anyone here that wants to give public testimony. And so Jessica, let's check with you online. If anybody's online, please.
We do not have anyone joining us virtually.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then I will close the public hearing. And if there's any additional comments from staff, I just have a few items that some people have emailed me that on the discussionary phase that they want me to bring up. So I think I'll do that now. I think it's important for the public to know that for the fourth year in a row, Eugene permits for single-family houses were at 167 units. This is the least since the Great Recession. We should be producing about 725 single-family homes a year. So I wanted to put that into some perspective. Our challenges have been going forward, getting more houses in our area has been Junction City and Cresswell are currently contributing to that yearly need, but unfortunately the DEQ standards are going to limit those very quickly for us to be able to build on them. So the public needs to know that we're facing as well. The handful of builders that I've talked to over the course of this item, and again, thank you for bringing back those options. That was a great help for us to look at that. But still, I think a handful of builders are looking at Lane County and looking at the dismal numbers of how many units we're building. And many of them are looking to the costs and affordabilities that pencil or don't pencil out. And they're leaving the area. So finding the labor force to make housing an applicable issue is going to become increasingly difficult as well. And also, to add to that statistic, according to the Home Builders Association, 2023 for single-family permits was the lowest on record ever, according to them. So those numbers disturb me, obviously, from a development and a futuristic kind of look to our county, but also for us to increase fees, it looks like we're also getting, you know, the tail end of the dog, or that, you know, that whiplash effect of everyone's increasing their fees, bumping them up considerably to make up for holding off in the past. And I think that's what's really hurting us. I cite, for example, Willamette Lane Parks in Springfield has almost doubled their fees. recent project we did, we paid them nearly $60,000 just for their fees. And to rebuild 12 units that we built last year would cost us now close to $100,000. So those kinds of things add on to add on to add on greatly affect the affordability and the desirability of building in our county. And so I don't like any of these options. But like Commissioner Farr said, as policymakers, we're backed into a corner where we got to figure out something. So although I hesitate to make any increases, I think the least amount of impact for me would be the 3-year 7% increase, and then a really aggressive, assertive effort to really cut back on efficiency or to make it more efficient so that if we're asking for someone to dip deeper into their pockets, we can at least offer them something more for their value. And I think if we're increasing the fees just to remain at status quo, I think we're missing the mark a little bit. And I think you would agree with me. I think that's part of the culture over there. So I'm not admonishing you. I'm just saying for the public, that's what we need to focus on. So for the county, we run out of land. You know, well, most of our land in this county is timber, 80% of our land. So we don't got a lot of land to build on. So we got to make the most of it. So those are the concerns that I have going forward. So in light of all of that, I've made those comments because constituents have asked me to make those comments. I would be more inclined to look at the slower phase increase in the fees. And, you know, I think that's the least amount of pain to rip off this Band-Aid, if I might say that. You have any comments on any of the response to those? I mean, it's just kind of my thoughts, but you're nodding with me and you obviously are feeling the pain, Mr. Miller, so I appreciate that. Okay, so we're down to discussion for the board. If there's any other comments you have at the close? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Nothing toward decision-making today. I think that we've kind of walked ourselves eyes wide open into the corner. But for the future, you know, you mentioned that we don't do much multifamily residential in the county. Well, there are reasons for that. There's no such thing as RR2, is there? You know, where rural residential 2, where it's designed specifically for multifamily. No, there isn't. But really, what can we do to, Oregon's land use laws make it very difficult to build outside of urban growth boundaries. And for reasons that have been well stated through the years and for reasons that have been well thought through throughout the years. And nobody is in favor of changing Oregon's land use laws. But as we move down the road, we not only have a shortage of housing, we have an affordability problem in housing, and we also have a shortage of services to support the building of housing. All of these things combine to let us know that we're doing something wrong in Oregon. We're doing something wrong here that really is making it more difficult for Oregonians to live in their own state. And for the long term, how do we address that? Well, we don't have an answer here today, but it's got to be something that we have to keep at our forefront. And whenever we work with our legislative delegation and whenever we select our legislative delegates, then we have to talk about the future of Oregon's land use and what are we going to do to make it more affordable, not for people to move here, but for Oregonians to stay here, for Oregonians to live here and actually live in a home here. So many things are affected by that. And we have something in the near future that we can at some point weigh in on, and that is the extension of metropolitan wastewater management facilities to Cresswell. That's a discussion that's ongoing right now. Doesn't help with your dilemma. It's not going to, but it will help with the housing issue, and it'll help in a relatively quick fashion if we're able to make that happen. I don't see a clear path to that at this point in time, but board, we're going to be talking about extension of MWMC services beyond its existent, all the way to Short Mountain, all the way through Goshen to Cresswell, which is going to allow us to maybe not more inexpensively build houses, but at least more freely build houses. So that's for the future. At this point, Chair, I'm ready to make a motion if you're ready for one.
I'm ready for a motion, sir. Thank you.
Then I move to close the public hearing, direct staff to modify Ordinance 2504 to include fee adjustments as outlined in option 2, and set a fourth reading deliberations on Ordinance 2504 to a 1:30 time certain on April 29th, 2025.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that. I just had one clarification that I think it's written so, but it includes the additional fee schedule adjustments as you've noted in the presentation.
The exemptions. Thank you.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, great.
And I didn't have that time certain note. Tell me that again, please, Commissioner.
April 29th, 2025. Is that still a good one, Kira? Great.
29th, 2025, and what time was that?
At 1:30 times.
You're awesome. Thank you very much. All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Trieger to modify order.
Commissioner Buck, second.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Buck, thank you for the clarification. To Got my notes right here. Excuse me just a minute. To modify ordinance 2504 to include fee adjustments as outlined in option 2, and to set the fourth reading and deliberations for ordinance 2504 to 1:30 PM, time certain on April 29th. And I also believe you included those exemptions, those 3 exemptions that he stated as well, yes?
I didn't specifically, but I presumed that they were, once again, enveloped into the motion.
Okay, sounds good. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Senega absent.
Excuse me, point of order, Chair. Does that need to be a roll call vote? Was that an ordinance?
Not
This
yet.
one.
Not yet. Okay, we're not actually
interrupt.
adopting the ordinance. We're just,
You're moving the order.
right, thank you.
Get there in a couple.
Great. I'm staring at the word ordinance and thinking ordinance, but right, thank you.
Okay, so next up on our agenda is, again, Mr. Miller is here for Board Order 25031108 in the matter of amending the Land Management Division fee schedule to adjust to planning, stormwater, and on-site sanitation and code enforcement fees. So if you will, go ahead, sir.
Thanks again. And just to reiterate, the same considerations for this item as in the previous. This is a companion piece. This would simply implement the 21.5% increase to the building, or I'm sorry, to the planning, land use, sanitation, and code enforcement and stormwater fees. Staff are requesting that the board make the same motion, identify either option 1 or 2 with the phasing of these fees as well as implement the targeted exemptions. One of the targeted exemptions would apply to the planning fees, that is the planning permits for the accessory dwelling units as well. So essentially the same item, just applicable to a different set of fees.
Exemptions, okay, awesome. Do I have a motion? Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Actually, a question prior to the motion, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
As we look forward, you know, we often ask you to make certain that we're not exceeding regulations, that we're not making it more expensive or more time-consuming to develop in Lane County. Can you assure me that we're not exceeding requirements of the state or of federal government on this?
Commissioner Farr, I think the board in land management just went through a pretty lengthy audit of our services, and I think I understood it. A part of that was to look at that very question. For the most part, I didn't see anything glaring come out of that audit. There was quite a lot of time spent on one specific area, and that's the legal lot review, which we'll be coming back to talk more about that. We've done everything we can to adopt model codes provided by the state that have the minimum requirements. When things are brought up or brought to our attention, if it appears that they exceed state law, staff have been responsive in trying to address that. So to the best of my knowledge, our codes reflect the minimum standards, but I'm sure there are attorneys who would differ and try to argue differently, but there always will be.
And, you know, that being said, Keir, you've once again satisfied my question regarding that, but it's something that we need to, on a continuing basis, make certain that we aren't doing more than the state requires, because the state has higher requirements. Sometimes we know we do have to exceed state requirements because of local conditions that exist, whether it be slope that you can't see from an airplane, you know, for instance. You know, I mean, there are many reasons that we would, but that we knowingly do it and that we understand that it's that we have to do it in that fashion. So all the while finding ways to pare away at the future increase of housing costs. So I'm prepared for the motion, Chair.
Go ahead, please.
And I would move to close the public hearing and direct, oops, am I still on 24? If it,
Item B.
Item B, just a directive.
I think that's where I am. Oh, item B. There we go. Can somebody help me with that motion if you have it right?
It's move to direct staff to modify Order 2503, 1108.
There it is. Move to order,
We were on 9B, which is an order, a board order.
Yeah,
pardon me, I had
2503.
I had the right thing in front, but maybe the wording is incorrect in my,
Item 9, yeah, 9B.
9B is where we are, right here, and view material. So my option is move to close the public hearing and direct staff to modify, it says ordinance 24504.
That's not A.
That's A. A.
Let's see.
They had both on this, but the second order was the second motion.
9B, there it is, 9B.
And then there's motions 1 and 2.
I move to direct staff to modify Order 2503-1108 to include fee adjustments as outlined in option 2 and set continued deliberations to April 29th, 2025. Thank you. And thank you for,
You're very welcome. Do we want to also include those 3 listed exemptions?
with the listed exemptions.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second to the motion? Thank you very much. It's been moved by Commissioner Farr and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Modify Order 2503-1108. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Senega absent. We have moved and passed the staff order to modify 2503-1108 to include fee adjustments as outlined in option 2, plus the 3 listed exemptions, and to set the continued deliberations for April 29th, 2025, 1:30 p.m. in Harris Hall. Very good. We slogged through it. Very good. We made it less painful, and we appreciate your all's help, colleagues, and you especially, Mr. Miller, for bringing that information back to us. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
All right, we're on to Commissioner's business. Item 10 of the day. We have some announcements. If any of our colleagues have announcements, what's going on in the area? Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. I'll just share two things. One, just on behalf of, I've received a lot of feedback from folks about how much they appreciate. These are folks that work directly with WIC clients who aren't actually county employees, but other programs in the community that work with WIC clients, and how much their families that they work with have been appreciating the parks, the reduction in parks passes for WIC clients. So I promised I would share that along, that families are giving great feedback and really feeling what a wonderful benefit that is, and gratitude. And then the other is I attended the open house for the Lane Event Center long-range plan process last week. It was a really good turnout from neighbors and lots of good feedback, and there'll be another one next month. So just encourage anyone watching, and certainly my fellow commissioners, to consider attending and learning more about the work of that steering committee and the consultants and some of the visualizations. They presented several different ideas to get people thinking, not as, do you like this one, that one, or the other one? It's always a fine line between being too illustrative for people to think we've already made decisions, and we haven't, but give enough of a clue of where we might be going and elicit some feedback. So those were just a really nice way to be in community and hear what folks' thoughts are about that asset. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the update. I was curious about that. Thank you very much. Anyone else for announcements? If not, we're on to some comments from this morning. Anyone have any comments from this morning? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. The problem with having remonstrance to the comments from this morning is that so much time has elapsed, and the energy in the room and the audience is left. And that's frustrating for me, because we've moved on to other subjects throughout the day. I can't take notes fast enough, when they're speaking, in order to remember what I would like to say much later on in the afternoon. And the challenge for me is that our chair is able to make statements in the beginning before our meetings begin, but the rest of us don't. And it feels like it's effectively silencing the other commissioners in front of our immediate audience. In that we are no longer treated the same in the way that we are able to speak with the audience as the chair has the capacity to do when the remonstrance is at the end of the day. And we're all equal commissioners in our own respect. We all deserve the opportunity to speak to our audience in the same way. But the format that's happening now in these last few meetings where remonstrance is at the end changes that dynamic, and I think in an unfair way. I would like us to have a further conversation about how we can effectively deal with that. I feel like either we all get the opportunity to say something at the beginning of a meeting, or we all don't. so that we can be treated in front of our respective residents the same way. I'm not sure even a fraction of the people will tune in to the end of our meeting to see if we happen to say anything about what they commented on. That's the sad part, because they've been expected after all these years. We've had the opportunity to comment. And it's true that other boards don't do this. I absolutely acknowledge that fact. But we have had a tradition of being able to do this. And if we're going to change the format, we either change the format for all commissioners or none of the commissioners. Just for having one person have the opportunity to say something and the rest of us not is just not fair. It's not fair to us. It's not fair to our residents that come in and take the time at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning to see us, who have traditionally been able to hear our responses. And I would like us to reconsider how we're formatting remonstrance in our daily agenda.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of remonstrances. Brian Matthews, Amy Anza, Buck Mueller, Emily Heilbrand, Denise Searcy, Anna Lardner, Sherry Jones, Bill Compton, Teresa Spar, Austin Hodges, Andrew Frost, Amanda Noble Flannery, David Eigel, Sidney Johnstone, Rose Wilde. Sorry, not going to talk to all of you. I can't. Simply don't have the time. And if I were to not talk to you this morning, I'm still not going to talk to you this afternoon. My problem with remonstrances, and I have served on other boards. I've been in the legislature. I've been in the Oregon. I've been on Eugene City Council. I've been on multiple other boards, and this was the only board that did have remonstrances immediately. The reason I'm in favor of not having remonstrances while the atmosphere is charged is because we simply don't have time to address all of the different areas of commentary that are brought before us, in which case we get to choose politically which ones we want to address and how politically we want to address them. And I don't like that in particular. So I prefer having the remonstrances at the end of the day when we do have a little bit of time to chance. Take notes. And I'm going to talk to Amanda Noble Flannery in just a second, very specifically. In fact, I am right now talking to Amanda Noble Flannery regarding remonstrances at the end of the day rather than immediately after, while the audience is charged and while the atmosphere is charged. I prefer it at the end of the day, and I'm going to support leaving remonstrances at the end because it gives us an opportunity to think about how we're going to respond rather than sometimes at great risk responding emotionally and in the moment. And ignoring, as we always seem to ignore, David Eigel, who's always here. There's never a remonstrance to him. Andrew Frost is back. It's good to see Andrew. His accent is from South England. Mine's from the North. But, and Andrew changed his normal narrative to reflect what the audience had to say. And I really appreciated that from Andrew. And Andrew had some good stuff to say, that he's had stuff stolen from us. Our courts in America, he said, seem to allow that to happen. But then he talked about YouTube having a scientific channel that demonstrates there are not two genders. I've seen that. I agree. There aren't two genders. You're right, Mr. Frost. But I don't want to say that when it's a politically charged environment. If I'm going to make my beliefs known, I would rather have a controlled fashion in which to do it. And I can do it either in writing, I can do it in remonstrance at the end of the day, or I can do it one-on-one, or I can have my own town halls where there is an open dialogue between multiple members of the audience and me. But in the meantime, having dialogue, remonstrance, that's not an open dialogue anyway. So I like it the way it is, and I worry about the risk involved in having remonstrances immediately. So to you, Ms. Noble Flannery, once again, thank you for your service on the on the Food for Lane County Board of Directors for all your years. She found our moving responses to the afternoon perplexing. And I'm offering why it's not perplexing. It gives us an opportunity to take time to form a remonstrance or a response, or to take a more significant approach rather than taking a few seconds in the morning when we have a full agenda ahead of us to say what few words are on our mind and then later determine that we've forgotten something, or we've forgotten somebody, or somebody in the audience is wondering, I wonder why they didn't talk to me. So that's, Ms. Noble Flannery, that's why I'm in favor of remonstrances later in the day, where it can be more, more controlled, not controlled, but more clearly stated and efficiently by the Board of Commissioners. And if I want to have a discussion with a group of people about a particular item, this is not the place for it. This is a business meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. I'll have a town hall. We'll have the discussion there. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. I heard Commissioner Buck asking for more discussion about it, so I don't know if there's maybe an assignment coming or if that's a request of the agenda team, so I wanted to get clarity on that before I...
Well, I think I'd like all the commissioners present to be able to talk about that. I mean, there is the concern of not having enough time to really be able to thoroughly digest what people come and tell us in the morning. I understand that, and I acknowledge that. But the chair gets to make a statement for several minutes every morning when the rest of us do not. That is not right. If we want to have a chance to make a statement in the morning, we also should be able to have that opportunity in front of a live audience. Otherwise, you are effectively silencing the other commissioners. And that's just not fair. And that, I think, should be a discussion that we have with all 5 of the commissioners present.
Thanks for that clarification. I agree, because either we have comments and remonstrance or we don't, and where they go and who gets them and when is really the two-part conversation. So I agree. So I would also like to see us have that conversation. I think I will leave it there for today on 10C. I do have future assignment requests, so I'll save that for that item. Thank you.
And I think our County Counsel, Mr. Robovet, wants to make a comment. Go ahead, sir.
Well, more of a report, I think. Normally, I don't give a administrative report, but as you may recall, some time ago, I asked you for a little bit of space and time to review your entire processes and procedures, and you'd gone through some processes. We're going to make some changes. I'm also working with staff to update your procedures because we have a new IT system coming in that's going to help us streamline some of those. But what I think I heard Commissioner Buck address, and just for what it's worth, and maybe for future thought and conversation, is really an opportunity for each of the 5 of you to speak at the beginning. From a loss prevention perspective, I want you all to have time to think, to be honest, before you respond on the fly. But I hear what Commissioner Buck's saying about everybody having an opportunity to speak at the beginning. If anybody is going to speak at the beginning, that strikes me as well. I just say that to put that bug in your ear when we have maybe a bigger conversation with all 5 of you. And I'm working with staff to actually bring an agenda item to you about your whole process and just maybe streamlining and improving it. But I'll stop talking now because now I'm just free flow talking, which is something I don't like to do in a public meeting. But just some thoughts. I think there may be a pathway here is what I'm saying.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you for that, Ms. Bovet, and I look forward to the pathway illuminating suddenly in front of me. I spent 10 years on the Eugene City Council with 3 different mayors, and when I was first there, Mayor Bascom spoke, and nobody else got to, because she was the mayor. For years, Jim Torrey spoke, and nobody else did, because he was the mayor. And then for years, Kitty Piercy spoke, and nobody else did, because she was the mayor. Now, our chair is not the mayor, but our chair is selected by us, and each chair has had a different way of using the gavel. And I've been around a lot of different chairs, and the use of the gavel really is up to the discretion of the chair. And I can speak about how I've seen the gavel being used by different chairs, and some chairs make a remonstrance of sorts every time an agenda item comes up. That's a prerogative of the chair, and I've seen it in recent years where the chair talks about the motion in their own words as the motion's coming forward, and then sometimes 1 or 2 or 3 times during the motion. So it really is it's up to You know, our chair is not the mayor. We're not Clackamas County. We're not Washington County. The public doesn't elect our chair, but we do select our chair. And we do it in a judicious fashion. So, so as far as how the chair runs the gavel, I may have issues with that, but that's the chair, and the chair has the gavel.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's move on to item C then, any committee reports? Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. I did want to share, as my colleagues know, but anyone watching might not, I serve on the state opioid, the Settlement Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery Board. This is the statewide board made up through legislation and governor appointments, tasked with spending the state's share of the multi-state opioid settlement funds. And I just wanted to report, it's been an incredible process. I can share more another time. I know we have a lengthy exec session ahead of us, but we made an early allocation of $13 million to Save Lives Oregon, which is the clearinghouse for harm reduction, primarily Narcan. And we also had a presentation on the extraordinarily excessive impact of the opioid epidemic on our Native American population. And so we made a decision to do an off-the-top 30% set aside for our tribes without asking them to use the same formula funding and allocation model we were, but just to trust that they know their communities and what they need best. And to peel 30% off the top and give it to them to implement whatever programs and support what they need. And so we just had a report back in the first biennium of 23-25 of these funds. We've now put $90 million out across the state to fund long-term systems infrastructure, primarily, as I mentioned, some through the Save Lives Oregon Fund, but through our 9 federally recognized tribes and NARA, the Native American Rehabilitation Association. And they are setting up remarkable programs all over the state that we had a report on, and it's just phenomenal work. And we are working towards, with those allocations and the formula that we've got for the remaining funds and moving forward, we've set a standard of a goal of having opioid treatment programs stood up 15 to 50 minutes away for 90% of the population in Oregon. And so that was a standard that we set up as a sort of benchmark that we're looking to hit with all of our other funding decisions and allocations. It's really exciting, frankly, generational work, particularly for the tribes. And so the Oregon Health Authority is the administrative home for that board, and there's a whole website stood up where you can see all of our work and timeline. But it's such a critical issue that's top of mind for so many people in the community, the addiction and overdose crisis. I just want to report out on some great work happening at the state level, and some investments of those funds are coming here to Lane County to start some programming here as well, in addition to whatever we may be using our county portion of settlement funds for.
Great, Commissioner. Thank you for that update. Anyone else? Commissioner Farr?
This is committee updates.
Yes, please.
A couple. I serve on our Mental Health Advisory Committee. We meet this week, and Mental Health Advisory will be presenting more aggressively or more uniformly recommendations directly to the Board of County Commissioners from the body itself. We count on the Mental Health Advisory Committee because everyone on there, except for me, I'm appointed as a non-voting liaison. Everybody has experience, whether they be providers or whether they be users of our systems. And so the perspective of Mental Health Advisory, I'm hoping that this Board of Commissioners will listen to the words that they have to say and the recommendations that they have and weigh them seriously as we go through our deliberations. That's what these advisory committees are for, to advise us and not to just meet and say they met and then wonder if anybody ever talked about it. Another one that I serve on, we meet this Friday, is the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission. That consists of Lane County, City of Springfield, City of Eugene. Springfield and Eugene have a much larger role in wastewater management. Springfield is the administrative portion of the commission. Eugene is the operations portion of the commission. And so Eugene funds the operation. Springfield funds the administration. And Lane County, because some of the ratepayers are in Lane County, and because everything exists within Lane County, does have a role on the committee also. It becomes more and more important in the rare times that we begin to look at what do we do beyond our existing envelope of services? A number of years ago, this Board of Commissioners blocked expanding services to Coburg. Coburg, at great expense, had to build their own facility. And it's not a particularly fantastic facility compared to MWMC, and it's very expensive for the people who live in Coburg. And there's a great deal of infrastructure that had to be built from the ground up in order to do that treatment plant. Cresswell is in a similar situation today. We all know this, and particularly people who are involved closely with the people who live in Cresswell. And it's not just because of their inability the moratorium on building houses. Because it's the quality of living and the quality of discharge that occurs from the existing sewage systems and lagoons in Cresswell. So we're going to be looking at how do we consider, and this is where Lane County provides a big part of the input, how do we consider using MWMC services beyond its existing envelope, which is generally the Eugene-Springfield metropolitan area. So that'll be coming up. You'll hear more and more about that. There is no revenue stream identified for that. And certainly, the city of Cresswell would not be able to bear the full brunt of the revenue on that by any stretch of the imagination, because it's very expensive to extend. But if we extend at the same time, considering extension to Goshen and LCC, which is outside of the envelope right now, and extending to Cresswell and to Short Mountain, then it could all become a little bit more of a manageable cost for the system. That discussion will be slightly held on Friday, but it's an ongoing discussion. The other thing we're going to be talking about is the septage distribution from the toxic tanks. Currently, they're distributed to Herd Farms, and they find a way to distribute for the entire metropolitan area the products. Well, Herd Farms is reaching their capacity. So at some point in time, we've got to worry about these tanks that aren't able to go into the metropolitan wastewater management system, but have to be distributed through a different filtering system. How are we going to handle it for the future? So those discussions are going to be real at the MWMC, but this Board of Commissioners is also very, very integral in helping with that decision-making, particularly when it exists outside of the urban growth boundaries. Then the last one I'll mention is the Oregon Health Authority / Association of Oregon Counties Local Government Advisory Committee. We meet the last Friday of the month, and we meet with OHA, and OHA recently had a listening tour throughout the state in all 36 counties, where they listened to how OHA could be more responsive to counties. And there's always been an issue that OHA has its own thought process, its own entities, and didn't regard counties very strongly. That is changing, and OHA is really making strong efforts to work closely with counties, and we'll expect to see more of that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item D, any future board item request? Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you. One is more a question. It's already an assignment, but this goes perfectly to the wanting to be able to make remonstrance. We heard quite a bit of testimony a couple of weeks ago about local access roads. We've been hearing it in bits and pieces, but we had quite a few people show up. And then sometimes the administrator does response to public comment and lets folks know something's on the agenda. So I thought that was coming to us, and then I didn't see it on the future agenda. So I'm just asking for an update on timing for when we're going to have that discussion about local access roads.
I'll need to check.
Okay. So it's just sort of a pinging of an existing assignment, because I thought I remembered you mentioning that was coming back to us at a date that would have been by now. Was today? I thought I heard. I could be misremembering.
When? April 29th?
April 29th?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what I had.
thank you. Just I've gotten a few people reach out to me individually asking, they thought that was happening. Thank you for that. The other, this is less an actual assignment and more of an agenda management request. In response to public comment that we've been receiving for several months, I understand we hopefully will be having our statement and policy commitments in response to public comment around providing services and maximum protections within our authority for our trans and immigrant, documented and undocumented immigrant communities will be coming back to us after our down week. And so I'd like to request of the agenda team that that item be positioned on the agenda as the first item after public comment, so that if the community turns out to weigh in and then wants to stay to hear us, it's easy and more seamless for them to do so, rather than having it at a time that might be harder for folks to track and participate and be in the room for that conversation. That's a request for managing the agenda more than that it is an assignment. Thank you.
And I will just note that we know Commissioner Farr has some appointments scheduled for that day, and so we're going to try to understand, and we actually did have a conversation about trying to place that item at the beginning of the agenda. So our desire is to try to make sure that we have all 5 commissioners physically here, physically and virtually here.
So do you need head nods for that, or is that just input to the agenda team? I just know folks are going to be paying close attention and want to hear our deliberations on that matter, particularly since none of us have been able to give any kind of response to public comment on whatever people may think of the item. So I don't know if you need.
We don't need head nods. That's in process right now, but thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
I would also consider before public comment, as an item before public comment, but that's not to me.
Yeah, we've been working with that with Mr. Mokreisky and the staff and Mr. Bobette, so.
Thank you.
All right. Without throwing Mr. Bobette under the bus, I may have a future board request, but I want to say something to the staff before I do that, or the board rather, is my office is in the same hallway as yours, and I would hope that you would feel free to come into my office and ask me any questions about the agenda, about how we're directing, about how the board is moving, or about how I'm running the board. So I would open that invitation to all of my colleagues as well. My door is open. And I'd be happy to talk with you about any of these items prior to a public session as per our decorum. Mr. Bobette, I'd like to see if maybe you and I could have a quick discussion about requesting a brief work session or an exec session with our county council into looking at the traditional use and practices of remonstrance in order to bring clarity and liability and to explain the changes in format. Would you be interested?
I'd be very interested.
Okay, then I would like to make a formal board order request then, Mr. Mokreisky. I'd like to request either a brief work session or an exec session with our county council into looking into the traditional uses and practices of the remonstrance processes so we can bring clarity and liability to the explanation and the change of the format. Now head nods? Yes?
Does that include statements that could be made before remonstrance?
I would hope that would be included as well as part of the parameter of the work session or the exec session if that's a deal.
I would like it be even slightly broader than that, include that, but also just kind of generally how your agenda flows. Because that's what I'm looking at with your staff right now. And quite frankly, that assignment was one I was going to take, even if you didn't give it to me.
Good. Do I have 3 head nods? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mokreisky. It's time to review the assignment, sir, if you will.
I just have that one you requested was a work session. We'll ask Mr. Bobette to determine if it's a public or executive session discussion.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there any other business we need to attend to? We're nearing the end of our regular meeting on Tuesday, but before we adjourn, I would like to read us into another exec session, which is going to be for 3 o'clock, time certain. Board of County Commissioners will now meet in one executive session. The session is to consider information or records that are exempt from law, from public inspection, and to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602F and ORS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to tape, video, record, or otherwise record an executive session, and verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive decision. After this executive session adjourns, we will then return to public session on Tuesday, April 22nd at 9 a.m. in Harris Hall. We are adjourned from our regular meeting.